As you can see here, they absolutely obliterated these toys. Now, this is one thing you want to think about when getting a parrot. Can you afford the expense of having to continuously replace these toys once every 2 or 3 weeks? Hey guys, we're back with the African Grey Journal, and today we're going to be looking at the top 10 questions you should ask yourself before you get an African Grey Parrot. The first question is going to be, is your entire family on board with this decision? Now, bringing an African Grey Parrot into your home creates a huge lifestyle shift, and there are so many protocols that you have to have in place with your household to ensure that your parrot remains healthy and happy. You have things like leaving doors open. If you have a fully flighted bird, you have to make sure that your entire family is on board with certain things to keep your bird safe. You want to keep the toilet seats down. You want to keep certain doors closed. You don't want to cook with non-stick pans, scented candles, air fresheners, cigarette smoke. All these different things are sometimes, for some people, can be non-negotiables. Things that we use in our everyday life that have to be eliminated when you bring a bird into your home. So you want to make sure that your entire family is on board with that, because non-compliance can lead to a lot of problems. You don't want to lose your bird over a family member or a friend doing something that's detrimental to your bird. Next, do you have the time to dedicate to this bird? Now, as you guys already know, birds are flock animals, especially African Greys, and they're extremely emotional and intelligent beings. And because of that, you need to have time to dedicate to them to ensure that their care and well-being is all set. So if you have one single bird, you are their main flock member. So you have to interact with them daily. And we're talking 1, maybe 2 hours a day with this bird. And if you're going to do that 1 to 2 hours a day, it must be sustainable. You know, we all get a baby parrot and we may have that novelty effect where we're playing with the baby parrot for the first 3 months, 2 to 3 hours a day, and then the novelty wears off and now you're moving on with your life and you're doing many different other things. These birds notice that shift. So if you're going to start something, you want to keep it going because these birds thrive on routine. And speaking of routine, when it comes to African Grey Parrots, they're very calm birds. They're very sensitive birds, and they're also very observant. So they notice these changes and shifts in their schedule. Now, for example, I've known people that have had baby African Greys, and 6, 7 months down the line, they went on vacation for 2 weeks. They came back and the bird was entirely plucked. So these birds are extremely emotional and they can grow extremely attached to their owners. And this can cause an issue if you're a person that travels a lot. You're spending a lot of time away from the bird. So in that case, you may want to have 2 birds. So the bird has a mate or a flock member that it can interact with while you're gone. Or you can socialize your bird to be familiar with many different people. And this will enable different people to handle your bird to ensure that he's not alone. And that leads me to my next point, which is the next question. Are you comfortable having a bird that thinks for itself? So, for example, you can get an African Grey Parrot for yourself, and that African Grey Parrot can decide that it no longer likes you and it likes your wife or your husband. That can be devastating for some. And if you have that situation happen, it's really out of your hands. So you have to be comfortable with a bird that thinks for itself, that does its own thing. For example, I mean, when you're working with a parrot, you have to also ask yourself, am I comfortable having an animal that bites? If you compare it with dogs and cats, I have a poodle, but my poodle doesn't draw blood every week from biting me. If you have a parrot, you can have instances where once, twice, maybe 3 times a week, the bird may decide that he doesn't want to be handled today. He doesn't want to be bothered today. And you may get a very nasty bite. And bites come with parrot keeping. And this isn't something that you commonly see with dogs and cats. So if you're not comfortable getting bitten or having an animal that may also give you a misdirectional cue in its behavior, where he may put his head down for you to scratch it, and whenever you go to give that scratch, you get a nice bite on your finger. So you have to be also comfortable knowing that this is a wild animal. Hand feeding may give the impression that the animal's domesticated. This is still a wild animal, and it does act as such. So you can't really, it's not a situation where you're dealing with an animal that's submissive to you. They're allowing us in their presence, and everything is on their terms. So you have to be mindful of that as well, having a pet that you can essentially not control its behavior. There's really no disciplinary measure that you can give to a parrot aside from putting it back in its cage, which is probably what he may have wanted anyway in that situation. To add to that, these birds mature at 4 to 7 years old. I am a totally different person than I was when I was 4 and 5 years old. And same thing goes for your parrot. You may have a bird with a specific personality, and as the years go on, the personality may completely change, and it may not be the bird that you initially had. And you have to be okay with that. Like I said, we're merely servants to them. They're tolerating us and allowing us in their presence and to interact with us. So we have to really adapt as the bird matures. They don't get as hormonal as, male cockatoos or Amazons, but African Greys do mature and eventually their behavior changes as well. It's not extremely drastic, but you definitely have to be prepared for that. Another question you want to ask yourself is, how large is your budget? And I say that because when I got my 2 African Greys here, they were very expensive. But to add to that, the preparation to buy the supplies needed for them was roughly $6,000 or $7,000. And I'll be making a video next week detailing every single expense that I had for these birds and what the total cost was. And the interesting thing about parrots is there are a lot of reoccurring expenses. We're talking toys, wood toys. These toys get destroyed. So you're essentially going to have to replace these toys over and over and over on a bi-weekly or monthly basis, as well as perches. A lot of people may put a perch in a cage and they may think this is a permanent fixture for my parrot. The bird may disintegrate that perch within 2-3 weeks and you have to replace it. So there are a lot of reoccurring expenses as well as food, vegetables, and fruits. It's a continuous cycle of burning money. So you have to be ready and have a budget in place for the parrot. It's not just a one fixed expense that you incur. This is a lifetime of expense. One other question you want to ask yourself is, are you allergic to their dust? Now, the dust that African Greys produce is due to their down feathers. So with an African Grey, their down feathers disintegrate into a dust, and it essentially coats and protects their feathers, keeping it waterproof and safe from parasites. Now, this dust is produced in a significant amount. I mean, it is a ton of dust. I vacuum every single day. Take one day off of vacuuming and you've got a problem. You also want to have an extremely powerful HEPA grade filter in your home to ensure that your air quality remains strong, because these animals shouldn't have to breathe in their own dust as well. So this is something you want to keep in mind. Now, the only way to know if you're allergic to an African Grey's dust is to visit African Greys. Visit some rescues, visit some stores, visit a friend who may have an African Grey. Experience the dust. If just brushing the feathers of an African Grey will produce dust. You just heard these two make a nice squawk here. It's actually 8 p.m. Now, are you ready for the noise? Now, all parrots make noise. I would say that African Greys are quieter than most species, but they can and will make noise. And African Greys typically specialize in high-pitched noises, the ones that annoy us the most, right? So they tend to mimic, they may have a microwave or another type of beeping sound. And this is something you have to get used to, especially if they hear a sound that they like. They may choose to repeat it for the rest of their lives. So you want to make sure that you're ready for the noise. You don't have sensitive neighbors that will be upset when they hear a fire truck every morning at 7 a.m. and it's actually your bird. So this is something you want to keep in mind. Are you ready for that noise? Again, African Greys can be on the quieter side when it comes to parrots, but I've never met a quiet parrot. So I just want to give you that for context. But what I also can say is I would never compare an African Grey to a macaw. A macaw is going to be much louder. Cockatoos are going to be much louder. African Greys tend to do higher pitched sounds, not the squawking that you hear with a lot of other birds. There are actually some moments, I work from home, there are actually some moments where I don't hear them at all. It's completely quiet. But I don't want to give you that impression that African Greys are quiet, because that would be a lie. Another thing is, are you a neat freak? Now, we spoke about dust, but are you a neat freak? Because some people, if they see something on the floor, it drives them crazy. With parrots, they have a very short attention span. So they may pick up a veggie, bite a piece off, and throw it. I mean, you have to think about what they do in the wild. Parrots are seed dispersers. And in order to take seed and disperse it, you've got to pick it up and drop it. So they have a very natural instinct to pick things up, eat them, drop them, throw them, fling them, whatever they may choose. And it's going to cause you to do a lot of sweeping and a lot of vacuuming. So just be prepared to do that for the rest of your life. And speaking of life, that's going to lead me to my next question. Now, you have to figure out, do you have someone in place to care for your bird if or when you pass away? Now, African Greys on average live between 40 and 70 years. Even if you got your bird at the age of 18, it's very possible that the bird may outlive you. So you want to make sure that you have someone in place that you trust that can take care of your bird in case anything ever happened to you. God forbid. We hope you live forever, but we know it doesn't work that way. So you want to make sure that you have someone in place to do that. That would be the most prudent thing to do when you're getting a pet. And obviously you want to make sure it's someone that understands how you care for your birds and would give them the same level of care that you give them now. And you want to make sure that you have that in writing, almost like a manual of how you care for your birds to ensure that it's in smooth transition. One thing that you should ask yourself, is your home noisy? Now, I know we spoke about African Greys being birds that like to vocalize and make noises, but I wouldn't call them extremely loud like a macaw or a cockatoo. African Greys are actually very calm, very relaxed, very shy birds. And loud noises and rambunctious activity, loud music, screaming, yelling, a lot of turmoil, this can really cause a bird to be uncomfortable, to be unhappy. I feel that African Greys, they like a predictable household. They don't like noise. They don't like sudden disruptions. They like to be able to predict everything going on in their world. And this may be a bit controversial, but I don't believe that an African Grey should be in the same home with a macaw or a cockatoo. And I say this because the difference in personality is way too vast. And the way a cockatoo or macaw vocalizes, I think it can cause a severe amount of stress with an African Grey parrot because it's simply not in their nature. And even when you look at a lot of the parrots that come from Africa, right? A lot of them are much quieter nature, much shyer. And when you have a shy bird, they're not going to do well around a lot of noise, a lot of chaos. So I do think that they aren't their most compatible. A lot of people may disagree with that, but that's just my opinion. Are you comfortable preparing meals for your pet? So a lot of people that have dogs and cats, they tend to open up a can or open up a bag of food and just plop it right in there. And some say that even that diet wouldn't be healthy for a dog or a cat. But when it comes to parrots, there are pellets available. There are different mixes available for them, but they do need a varied diet. So you can't just give pellets. You can't just put seeds in a bowl and feed it to them. You have to give them variety. So we're talking nuts. And we all know nuts are extremely expensive. Almonds, cashews, pecans, walnuts. These are expensive foods that you're giving your pet bird. And you want to make sure that you're able to have that in the budget, as well as fruits and vegetables. Chopping up fruits and vegetables isn't the most fun activity, and this is something you're going to have to do weekly if you're making it in large batches. Food processors make things easier, but I'm not a fan of, a chopped up diet. The chop diet, I'm not a huge fan of it because parrots like to hold their food. They like to pick it up. So if it's just a big pureed mush, as Tony Silva calls it, I don't think they enjoy it as much as holding a little piece of carrot or holding a piece of broccoli. So I'm not a big fan of a finely chopped food. And this is something that we're gonna have to do, slicing and dicing these fruits and vegetables. I like to feed a lot more vegetable than fruit because parrots don't typically eat sugary fruit in the wild, and that's about all we have available in America. So that's really my thoughts on that. And lastly, I mean, it's summertime. We're all enjoying the weather, but if you like vacations, parrots may not be the best fit for you. As you know, parrots enjoy their routine. They thrive on routine. And if you're leaving the home for 2 weeks at a time, this can cause a lot of emotional distress with your parrot. So you want to make sure that you're able to have a much more stable environment for them. I mean, one vacation a year is not bad, maybe two, but if it's frequent traveling, maybe you travel for work, it may not be the best fit. And like I said, if that's the case, you may want to either get a pair so that they're bonded to each other and you have someone who can do the caretaking activities for you, or you just resort to visiting friends with parrots and visiting parrot stores. But these are my top 10 questions you should ask yourself before getting an African Grey. If you're interested in learning more about how I care for my African Greys on a daily basis, click the video here. It's my routine, and I'm glad I could share it with you all. And I'm looking forward to digging deeper into other topics about African Greys because I have a lot of fun doing it, and I appreciate your support. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll have a lot more videos on the way.